The dunes behind Woolamai carry the scars of 100 years of human development. Trees and bushes were cleared and burnt out, the grasses consumed by grazing. Further devastation occurred with the introduction of exotic animals like the rabbit, exotic plants, and the use of herbicides and pesticides. Finally, people come trampling over the dunes to get to the beach, or even drive cars and dune buggies through them. Fisheries and wildlife are trying to repair some of the damage. We are replanting these dunes with tussocks of marram grass. But no matter what conservation or reclamation work we carry out on Phillip Island, we cannot alter the basic pattern of development here. The future of Phillip Island is fixed. The heavy residential and recreational use of the island will continue. The situation is different on French Island. There the options for what will happen in the future are still open. The Fisheries and Wildlife Division is represented on French Island by a young man called Chris Barnes.
I first came to the island because I like isolation. Not so much from people, but I like to have a feeling of space around me, of empty land that isn't filled with houses and industries where you can breathe and hear yourself speak. French Island has an interesting history. The name comes from a French scientific expedition which came here in 1802. They took a pair of black swans back to France with them. Black swans were unknown in Europe until then. In 1916, a prison farm was established on the island. It housed 127 prisoners and was completely self-sufficient, supplying all its own meat, vegetables and dairy products. Now it's one of the island's main tourist attractions.
Here are the cells you've been waiting to see. As I said, they're all single-man cells, bar the ones in each corner of each block, which are three-man cells. If you look over this way, the yellow building you can see is the warden's quarters, or was in the days of the prison. It's now used as a self-contained unit for the recreation camp.
The prison farm was closed down in 1975, and now it's a camp run by the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation. The camp is used by school groups who come to study or simply enjoy the island. It's also used by groups like bird watchers and bushwalkers who are drawn by the island's natural attractions. About one half of the island has now been declared a state park in order to conserve and protect the natural ecosystems and wildlife populations. It also provides opportunities for recreation and education associated with the natural environment. The declaration of the state park recognises the outstanding significance of French Island for nature conservation, particularly in that it still supports plant communities like heath woodland, salt marsh and mangroves, which have virtually disappeared from the mainland or are under threat from industry and recreation. The wildlife includes plenty of snakes and koalas. Koalas were first introduced in the 19th century, and they have thrived here because there are plenty of the eucalyptus they like to feed on, including manna-gums. But perhaps the main interest of the island is in its prolific bird life. Over 200 varieties have been recorded, including many of the water-breeding birds like ibis, swans and waders. At low tide, the island is surrounded by vast stretches of mudflats, which provide a feeding ground for these birds. Naturally, I spend a lot of my time patrolling the island, observing natural events and the effects that human beings have on the environment. Along the way, I get to see some magnificent sights, like these white-breasted sea eagles. A pair of them nest here, and they are extremely rare. They always feed in the same tree, and the ground underneath is strewn with the remains of their varied diet. Certainly one of the factors that has preserved the island is the relative lack of access. There is no land link. The island can only be reached by ferry. Visitors are few, and there has been no alteration of the environment by large numbers of motorised vehicles. One of my jobs is to meet the ferry. I have to do things like check on the shooters who come to the island, making sure they've got licences, and directing them to the parts of the island where rabbit shooting is permitted. There are few facilities for either visitors or permanent residents. There is one general store post office, and there is a primary school with about 8 pupils. The main social centre for the residents is the sports oval. There are about 50 people living on the island at present, just enough men to field a cricket team to do battle with visitors from the mainland. The islanders are a hardy, independent lot, most of them from families that have been settled on the island for several generations. To survive on this island, you have to be resourceful and self-sufficient, able to do just about everything for yourself. French Island is unique in Victoria, being an unincorporated territory without local government and rate structure. Provision of services such as power and water is the islander's own responsibility. Most of the residents derive their income from farming, from sheep and cattle grazing. Some supplementary income is gained from tourism, and there is also a small industry based on collecting seagrass, which is shipped to the mainland to be used as household insulation. Dotted around the island you find chicory kilns, relics of the industry which was the main source of income up until the 1960s. One of the pillars of the island community is a farmer called Robert Thompson, who comes from an old island family. He possesses a particularly fine example of a chicory kiln on his land. Well, how long has your family been on the island, Bob?
Well, my mother came when she was 3, my father came when he was 9, and my mother is coming up to be 90 in the next fortnight.
80 odd years, gee. Quite a history. And I guess there must have been plenty of changes in that time.
Yes, there was a population of probably 140 to 150 when I was a young fella, and around the First World War times. But since then, through speculation and other things that have happened, the population has dwindled down to, well, at the present time, only to be about 50.
I guess there was a lot of chicory grown on the island at one stage, Bob.
Yes, there was nearly every family grew chicory in the early days. That was the main source of income. And one of the main reasons for it being grown by everybody was the transport problems of getting goods, etc., to and from the island. And chicory was one of those commodities that could be dried down to about a quarter of its original weight. hence not like vegetables, raw materials. This was a dried product, and the freight costs were virtually cut to a minimum in comparison with other commodities.
Yeah.